All right. So, as an advanced educational professional, how would you apply data and data analysis to ensure your continuous improvement plan is focused on closing gaps? So, first of all, I think that as educators, making student learning be the top priority is absolutely essential, and part of that is using the data, not only testing the kids and knowing your demographic and taking the demographic data, but being able to utilize it to make the education what it needs to be for each child. And so in demographic data, we had a module, at least one module, where we talked about demographic data of our school district and its effect on learning. And for my school in particular, at Central Heights, we have a shockingly high rate of poverty, much higher than the state level. We're not a very ethnically diverse community, but we are a rather high poverty rate. And so being able to understand how to serve those students and make sure that they're set up for success is super important. Um, so the when it like for instance in this COVID-19 pandemic that we're dealing with right now and continuous learning, that's when we quickly realized how many kids have access to internet. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere, and so having access to internet's been kind of difficult. And also, it's obviously been really essential that we provide meals to kids because of our how high of a free and reduced lunch number that we have. And so trying to set kids up for success and using that data and being aware of that is super important. Um, when it comes to my school, as far as our use of data and how we do this, currently we have at the beginning of the year we look at our state assessment data and we kind of look at the gaps and we try to kind of brainstorm some ideas on how to fix it. It's kind of been effective in many ways, but in other ways it could be changed. I could see as an administrator kind of spinning off of that and taking that good example, and when I become an administrator and making it to where I would take it to the next step and have teachers have full buy-in and vote on what we could do to say bridge the gap in reading or bridge the gap in math assessments, and being able to see what will work and utilize everybody's abilities to brainstorm ideas.
I can start with the first question. Something we've kind of talked about with each of our groups is just how would you connect that demographic in your student achievement data? Because you were talking about how your school, the student achievement data was one of maybe one thing you would have done differently.
How would I connect that? Um, so let me check right here. So if I was going to connect it to as far as the connecting the achievement to the demographics, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so using those data tables and the pivot tables that we've used in here would make you well aware of that. Looking at the state data and knowing what issues you have in terms of, for instance, your demographics, and that what might cause some great gaps is the first step. But then being able to take those students' achievement data and putting it into that pivot table would be what my first suggestion would be to do.
One of the things you mentioned was getting teacher buy-in. How would you go about trying to get that teacher buy-in?
That's a good question. So I teach high school agriculture, and we don't do assessments at all. There's one available at the state level, but it's voluntary, and we've never participated in it. And so that's one of the things that I've kind of been trying to figure out how you would get people, all staff, to buy into the idea of closing these gaps. And I think that you're going to have to lean on the hope that you have employees in your school district that have the same idea that student achievement and student learning is top priority, and that sometimes if as a high school shop teacher, if I can incorporate math standards into my lessons in some way, and help kids to kind of use it in a real world situation, and that relates to to better scores in a math in MAPS testing or math assessment, then that's success for everybody. And I think that you kind of got to, hopefully you have staff that can put themselves a little bit um, on the back burner and focus on the kids. All right, you guys have any more questions? Well, one of the things that I would like your guys' help on would be how would as a as a teacher that has very limited experience when it comes to testing data in particular. What works well for small groups like the math department meeting and seeing these gaps? How does that look at your schools, and what seems to work best?
So to paraphrase what you're saying, you're asking basically the people that do have to use the test data more, what works well.
Mhm.
For math specifically, I've seen you're basically hitting the nail on the head of you're not getting test data back and I'm getting loads of it back. So that's one of the strengths is the amount of testing that's going on, but that's also one of the weaknesses for math too is the amount of testing that's going on. As you all know as educators, when you over test students, they're just going to give up and you're not going to get valid results anyway. So I would say choosing the right test would be probably as a culmination of what I would say is important, at least from the math department side of that.
I agree with you. I also think maybe there are some ways that you could incorporate data collection that's not so formal, but some informal data collection that you would have to create yourself. Maybe I'm not very familiar with what your standards, your content would look like, so I'm not sure if I could offer anything specific that way, but just some of those quick checks or exit slips, or I don't know how you would make it fit into your agriculture.
Okay, so what I'm gathering from both of you, as far as Ashley on the here and now, I can start taking some data myself within my class and do some summative, informative assessment data, and kind of disfigure that number, which it actually does fit the ag content. We don't have standards, but we have competencies, so it's pretty well the same. And then as far as Jacob, when I become an administrator, from what I'm taking from it is that you got to be pretty selective on what testing, what tests are most meaningful and what the purpose of each one is, so that you're not over testing kids, and that you're allowing the math department to get the best out of each student, or every department get the best out of each student, not over testing them.